My name is Paul Grosinger. I'm a group publisher at a company called Annex Business Media. We publish 60 plus trade magazines, including SPT News and Canadian Security, which are two sponsors of this event. We have Jason here from Mircom. We want this to be an open discussion to some degree, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask Jason along the way. The session you're sitting in now is called Building Automation, Control, and Reliability. And the session will talk about integrating security and monitoring as well as lighting controls within condos and buildings. As I said, we have Jason Falbo here from Mircom. Jason is the VP of Engineering at Mircom and is responsible for overall management of the engineering and R&D teams, including new product development, regulatory approval, and customer support for Mircom's portfolio of intelligent building solution. Additionally, as one of the owners of Mircom, Jason is involved with business strategy, marketing, and operations for the company. Since Jason started at Mircom in 2008, the company has launched a number of new product initiatives, and today it is among Canada's most successful intelligent building solutions providers. So without further ado, here's Jason.
Thank you very much. I guess you just move on that front.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me?
Just a little bit better?
Much.
We'll try and get the mobile microphone active so I can move around a little bit. I get a bit fidgety on stage. It's still nerve-wracking, of course, to stand up in front of a group of my esteemed peers and pretend to be an expert in these technologies. I do have a little bit of expertise. We've been working on these solutions for quite a long time. Mircom's been around since 1991, as Paul mentioned. Just before I get started, I want to take care of two items of business. One is to compliment both Dina, Valentine, and corporate events on this conference. I think it's absolutely fantastic. We were one of the first title sponsors last year. We've repeated that sponsorship this year. And it's very exciting to see the appetite and interest in intelligent home, intelligent building, connected home, connected condos, and connected space, smart solution space here in Toronto. And kudos to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and visit with us as well. So same theme as last year. If people were at my presentation, you'll know how I started. I want to start in a similar way this year, and I'm going to throw out a question out there, and there may or may not be a door prize for the correct answer. And the question is, what was the final score of yesterday's Blue Jays game, and who won? Just yell it out if you know it. Who said it? All right, Kevin, my main man, come up and pick your door prize. That's not courtesy of Lowell G, but provided by them. So thanks a lot, Kevin. And yes, the Blue Jays did win, so we're very happy about that. All right, let's move on. So Mircom, founded in 1991, we started off in the fire detection and alarm space, and we've been building a slew of other solutions, mainly for interior building, but also moving out into the wide area and campus environments. We'll see some of the mass notification solutions discussed a little bit later. Focus on today's sessions. I want to speak specifically, I know there's a few people representing developers, property owners, and property managers in the room. So I want to talk a little bit about the challenges and opportunities that you face in the market today. I want to talk about some of the sociological challenges in addition to the technical challenges that we face. I want to give you a little overview of a case study of an intelligent building or connected building project that we just completed in our own facility. I also want to discuss what we refer to as our intelligent building backbone, which is really the glue that binds all of these individual systems and applications together. And finally, present a framework for reliability. In a lot of my conversations over the last many months, one of the main issues is that people find promise and they dream about the value that these solutions will bring, but realizing that return on your investment is a little bit challenging. So really borrow from some of my experience in the life safety space to explain exactly how we ensure system performance and reliability over the lifetime of not only the systems, but the properties that they're involved in, and see if we can shift some of that same model with a few tweaks here and there into the intelligent building or connected home space as well. All right, condo craziness. Anybody who's been living in Toronto for the last 10 years understands exactly what I'm talking about here on this slide. So with a slew of developers putting up a slew of different properties, it's been pretty exciting. You know, the prices have gone more or less through the roof. I shouldn't really say that, but they have gone through the roof. And part of that expectation that comes with rising prices is that consumers are expecting more out of their facilities. So if we look at the amenities that have been presented really from the 60s and 70s through to about 10 years ago, It really focused on the physical plant and physical space, physical environment within those condos. So the amenity list would be things like your party rooms, your gymnasiums, your billiards rooms, and things that were physically visible within that building, including within the suites. You talk about granite countertops and hardwood flooring upgrades and maybe some nice appliances or chrome faucets. Today's consumer is expecting something dramatically different. With the smartphone generation and the technological advances we've seen, people are expecting a more digital experience within their environments. So what we're trying to do is help developers and owners and property managers put together a slew of digital solutions that helps them market to the new demographic which is buying these properties for years to come. The opportunities to really present added value to the consumer or the end user are around the comfort that they experience in the building, the convenience that they have interacting with their environment, and of course the cost reduction that you achieve through areas like reduced energy use, which creates energy efficiencies and reduces your annual maintenance budgets or monthly maintenance budgets that you're paying back to the condominium association. We're also seeing some reports coming in through real-time 2D, 3D dashboards that allow building operators and maintenance staff, facility staff, to address the issues before they become major issues. So things like leaks that are happening in a remote area of the building can be detected very simply with a leak detector on a wireless transmitter, rather than days later when the insurance company calls you and cuts your policy off because you've now lost 30% of your physical environment. On the comfort side, things like priority alarm response, we have our in-suite tablet outside, which is receiving messages from the fire alarm system, giving people tuned messages to their specific demographic within their suite when there's an environmental emergency such as a fire or tornado or weather warning in the area. And we also see the more interactive communities with the web portals that developers are putting into their facilities as well. Great companies like Bazinga, which are really pushing this market forward, and Mircom as well, which have property management solutions allowing tenants to push tickets down in a more streamlined IT fashion so that you can actually have a real dialogue about level of response from your staff rather than just complaining about the fact that the post-it note was lost or the phone call was not returned. So providing these solutions allow people to connect not only better with their property managers, but also to meet the people within their buildings. On the convenience side, the remote management, it allows you to do things like your HVAC control and your lighting control from anywhere you are, and all the use cases that we talked about letting your pet walker in and your babysitter and people cleaning your apartments and such, all that remote access is really what people expect more than something that is to dream about for buildings in the future. Despite all these opportunities, of course, we still see a number of major challenges. One of them is, as we see at this conference, there still seems to be way too much hype about this space. We're always talking about what's coming down the road, and what we're going to do, and what's possible, and 10 years from now, what you're going to see. So as part of my discussion today, I really want to filter some of that hype and give you a solid foundation in the technologies that are available to be used at this time. We're talking about what is now versus what is next. I think one of the other big challenges is that professional services in the space really seems to be lacking. We had a few conversations even just this morning about the fact that once you're putting these intelligent networks into these buildings, who's going to service and support those issues? I gave the example of a couple weeks ago when I was stuck in an elevator at another conference, not this one, thank you very much for keeping it ground floor. And luckily, after 28 minutes, the 10 of us, which were kind of sucking air and disrobing, trying to figure out how we were going to survive for the next hour, were greeted by the Otis repairman, who happened to be in a nearby building and showed up to force open the doors to let us out. If you're relying on these IP networks and backbones to allow you entry into your apartment or for the fire alarm systems to operate, there's got to be that next level of service industry that can be available within a half hour or a 60-minute service time to attend to any of the issues that come up along the way. Also, we find that the business case is really still up in the air. It's not crystallized at this point. There's a lot of debate. Who's going to pay for the equipment? Do people want the equipment? Should it be base building or should it be premium? Should it be sold in the sales office after the fact? Who's actually funding this equipment? And if we look at the chart here by Goldman Sachs, you identify the IoT ecosystem. Well, in my opinion, there's a glaring gap. Where is the connected building? It should fit somewhere between the connected home and the connected city, but it's not really recognized as a space within the IoT ecosystem as it stands today. So we're kind of forced to figure out how we can get these other technologies, be it the wearables or the smart grids, and apply them in the building sense itself. Beyond the sociological challenges, this slide is very familiar to a lot of engineers, and we have difficulty to read it. Between the acronyms, the protocols, the changing wireless threads coming on board, Wi-Fi technology for streaming out media, it's way too confusing for the people who do this on a daily basis. I can only imagine how the owners, developers, managers, and individuals living within these facilities feel. So, moving on, Three simple solutions. I propose that we educate, we standardize, and we regulate. And we'll get into each of those in a little bit more detail. On the education side, I wanted to do something that was a little bit interesting, so sometimes a little bit creative. I created my own metric, which I call the XYZ metric of technology. Also, the point of this metric, as you see, you read the graph there, is that depending on who you talk to, it's a framework for you to understand for your system spend within your buildings. It should probably either be a 20-60-20 spend or maybe a 30-40-30 spend on your system's budgets on technologies in each of these domains. So the X phase is what I call the experimental technologies. It's things that a scientist or a technologist has come up with a new solution, they want to try it out. You're not really sure if it's going to be around in 5 years from now, but it's something that maybe is a little bit funky, or you can market it. I saw the video game rooms coming up as a very popular amenity in recent years. So it's kind of these technologies that they may or may not be fatty, we just don't have enough information. They don't have the longevity as of yet to understand where they will fit 5 or 10 years from now. The Y-phase technologies are technologies that have moved more into that mass market, but are we really extracting the maximum value from these technologies at this point? So we've adopted this system, we've paid to commission and install it, but we're not really using it. And it's just kind of sitting there in the background and we're thinking, something's wrong here, what's missing from that? So we ask, why do we have this and how do we improve it? In the Z phase, Z's kind of like sleepy, boring. It's kind of those technologies that they've now passed the mass market point to the point where we don't even really talk about them anymore. They're just things you need in order to operate a building. With respect to standardization, this is a diagram. When I'm explaining to people what we mean when we're talking about systems interoperability and systems connectivity, I think this takes it down at a crystallized view of what is actually happening within the building. So we're huge proponents of the IP backbones inside of these buildings. IP is that protocol that's been around for a very long time. It's the foundation of the internet. And as the foundation of the internet, I think it's something that we can bet to be around for a very long time going forward. While the application level protocols like the BACnets and the Zigbees and Z-Waves change into your threads and your Modbus and your LAN, etc., IP is going to be that common base framework that's always going to be there. So our vision is really to take your individual building solutions and make sure that you have some method back, whether it be native or through a gateway, to get that information onto that IP network. Why you need it back on that IP network is that the visualization tools that we use, the 2D and 3D visualization tools, are pulling information off that IP network and presenting it back for real-time situational analysis and emergency or security breaches, and also for facility staff to maintain the systems that are in the buildings. Local area networks, we believe that they'll always change. I've given 3 examples on this slide, Z-Wave, Zigbee, and Bluetooth, but of course Wi-Fi, Thread, or other options. The local area networks are always going to be collecting the sensor data. The important thing for us is that that sensor data makes its way back through a gateway onto the IP network for the facility. So regulation. On this slide, in the top part of the slide, we see both regulating the building and the performance of the building, and also regulating the product and the performance of the product in the lower half. So associations, we're in Canada, so I'm going to reference Canadian Fire Alarm Association. They are guaranteeing the performance of your life safety and fire alarm equipment inside the buildings. U.S. Green Building Council, with their LEED program and the LEED Points program, they are trying to regulate the energy efficiency of buildings, or the performance, the high performance of the buildings. So there are organizations working at the building or the application level. When we get on the product side, Underwriters Laboratories, for example, BACnet Testing Laboratories, and Zigbee Alliance, they are ensuring that the products that people claim to be using these standards are conforming to the standard, to the letter of their law. They actually have test facilities where you bring your products in, you demonstrate the functionality, and they will say yes or no based on what we are promoting to the consumer as a base set of performance standards. This product does or does not comply. Jumping into our case study. So it just happens to be our own new building. I'm very intimately familiar with this because in addition to my day job, I was working as project manager on our build out for the last 12, 18 months. It was a difficult project. We had multiple tenants. On the ground floor was the sales service distribution arm. And on the second floor was an R&D department. The point being that these are 2 tenants with different requirements. Some had regular customer visits. Some actually didn't want people entering into the space. But we decided on a base framework of technology that would satisfy the needs of both clients. Just to put some numbers on this to help people understand where we're going, if you assume that the construction budget was approximately $2 million, we budgeted about 10% of that for the systems that we employed inside of our buildings. We believe this to be one of the most intelligent office environments anywhere in the world as it stands today. How did we decide the technologies that we put in? So, like any good project, you're going to have to prioritize. You make a list of all the things that you might want, maybe you brainstorm that on a whiteboard. You're probably going to attach a metric as with respect to how much that system's going to cost, or how difficult it is to implement, or who's actually going to find utilization of that system. And we developed what we felt were our Z products. So the Z phase, it's kind of something that you absolutely need. We're talking about the fire detection alarm, the access control, CCC surveillance, and emergency lighting. I throw HVAC control in there because I know in Canada it's very difficult to work if it's too hot in the summer and too cold in the wintertime. So for me, I even throw HVAC controls into your mandatory Z-phase technologies. The next set of technologies that we picked were our Y technologies. These were things that we saw evolving in the market space, but they were not requirements to actually get into that building and operate it. And I think this is the challenges that a lot of the condominium developers, owners, and operators face, is that beyond that critical spend budget that you have, what is that next phase of technology that you want to bring in? And that becomes a little bit more of a conversation. You talk with your tenants about what they're interested in, what their goals are, and it becomes competitive. If you have 3 other vendors with that same physical property on the same street that you're selling, you need to decide what's going to get you your most bang for your buck. In our case, we went with facility monitoring. And why facility monitoring? One of the things that people are obviously trying to avoid when they have large buildings and capital expenses is replacing equipment after it fails. And typically, equipment gets replaced only when it's been ignored. If you maintain equipment properly, weekly, monthly, annually, what have you, it'll last a very long time, in most cases. When you're not maintaining equipment, you're only finding out after the fact that something has blown up or there's a huge flood inside of your building, this is something that's going to be a huge cost for you down the road. So our vision is investing a little bit up front to get that real-time facility monitoring. Sensor Suite is outside. They do a great job of this. If you know up front, you can avoid those costly repairs down the line by making sure that you're managing on a daily basis. The VoIP intercom solution, for us, connecting people within our facilities. You know, as our teams grow, one of the challenges that we faced is we're actually located at the cross-section of the York-Spadina subway extension, so right up in the last stop in Vaughan, near the Vaughan Metropolitan Center. And we're the last manufacturing facility with a slew of high-rise office developments and condominiums going on around us. So logically, we don't know how long we can be in that space. We see in the future, as we have a more distributed workforce, we need ways to connect these people going forward. So we invested in the VoIP intercom solutions to make sure that independent of where people were working as the company grew, we still have a way to connect people in. We also went for the lighting control. So how many times I've driven past the building myself at night and seen those lights on. It's an area where we're aware that we're wasting money on a daily basis, and the controls to actually get in there and do your circuit on-off commands, they're not that expensive. So we said that these are the set of technologies that we want to make an investment in for various reasons, and these were discussed amongst our team. The X-phase technologies were really things that we're trying to get a little bit of excitement. You know, everyone wants to feel pride in the work that they do. As owners, you want to feel pride that you're building condominiums that people are buying and you're selling out very quickly. As managers, you want to feel pride that the people are comfortable inside of your environment and they're happy and they come and thank you because it's not too stuffy and it's not too cold and it's not too hot. So pride of the workforce is really providing them tools so that they can do their job better. What we invested in was audio-video matrices for the presentation. So we have 13 screens throughout the 10,000 square foot floor plate. And this allows, with the 13 screens and the speakers in the ceiling throughout the facility, to do large presentations to large groups of people. We also went after the power metering. So some people might call power metering a stable technology, and it really depends on the industry you're in. If you're in assembly or manufacturing industry, yes, they are metering at the building level pretty well everywhere that you go because it's a huge cost for them. Again, talking about the motors or the fans failing, to replace that, it's worth the investment up front. But when we get into your commercial office space, this is not a standardized item. And if you are doing the power metering, you're not necessarily doing it at the fixture, the lighting circuit, or the socket receptacle level. So what we did is we did power metering for our rooftop units for the HVAC. We did all of our lighting in our meeting rooms and boardrooms. And we also did the receptacles inside of the kitchen. So we want to know how much espresso people are making on a daily basis. We can encourage them to drink a little bit more caffeine if things are slowing down on the product line side. What was the result? Obviously, utter and complete chaos. You know, for us, who are very educated in this space, we're doing this on a daily basis, we thought that it would be a breeze. And this is where I really feel for the audience in here, because I see firsthand the challenges that are going on in the industry when we're actually trying to apply these solutions. So part of what I'm doing here today is trying to explain to you some of the lessons I've learned so that you can avoid making these same mistakes when you bring these systems into your projects going forward. So the first lesson I learned was you really got to choose the right vendor. You know, don't be shy to ask them to view a live demo or visit a reference site, or even let you borrow some equipment so you can play with it yourself before you deploy it into your facilities. As they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The second lesson I learned is that standardization is very important. And I had vendors coming in One product that we don't actually manufacture ourselves is the CCTV cameras. So we had vendors come in and people were talking to us about OMBIF IP compatible cameras, which is an open standard for IP cameras, and others that were saving us substantial amounts of money, maybe in the order of 40 or 50%, to go with their integrated solution. So a camera that tied back with that NVR, but was not interoperable in the OMBIF ecosystem. Unfortunately, we had existing building that was on the OMBIF standard. So while we might have saved money because we were offered that opportunity by a vendor who was not standards compliant, it would have ended up being more maintenance, more support, and more effort to integrate with the rest of the facility, and then for our IT department to manage it over a period of time. So make sure that you can do an apples-to-apples comparison when the different vendors come in with different products. Ask them about the standards, ask them about the interoperability, and ask them to demonstrate that for you as well. Also involve your IT staff. You know, with a lot of developers that we talk to today, IT departments sometimes exist, most times don't exist, and if they do exist, it may not be the people who are familiar with building environments. Maybe it's the office land staff who are being borrowed to do on-site projects. Now, a lot of developers are getting a little bit more progressive. They're understanding the need to have these people involved. But going back to the example I said before, if you have this system going down, you can't rely on your concierge making minimum wage to be able to go and understand how to reroute the ports or establish a connection through your firewall to make sure that these systems are working. And then you also have to leave buffer in the schedule for integration testing. So when we wanted to move in, and I'm sure you guys have faced this as well, if you're doing property development or property ownership or property turnover, you need to move in. You don't care if those non-essential systems are working or not working, because either people have moved out of the previous facility, or you have a deadline or financial penalty for not delivering. The buffer for the integration testing of these systems is often left out of that schedule. So be aware that with interoperability, with adding the systems into the building, you're going to have to refine your timelines and your production schedules to leave this gap in there, or buffer in there, to make sure that it gets tested properly. Also with respect to regulation. So we'll talk a little bit more about regulation when we get onto the fire alarm side. But some of the tips that we've used is establish your sign-off criteria at the beginning of the project. So you're spending $50,000 on a lighting control system. Actually go through and develop the use cases. What do you want to achieve with that system? Do you want to have a schedule for the weekend, for the weekdays, for the weeknights? Do you want to have independent control from the user's desk, from their mobile phone, from the circuits on the wall? So set this criteria out ahead of time. So not only are you negotiating the bill of materials and the cost of the projects, but you're also negotiating the sign-off criteria before the project gets started. It saves you a lot of time at the end of the project, and a lot of arguments are resolved by the contract itself. The other thing, and it's very common, a lot of you already do this with your construction trades, or the electricians and the mechanical contractors in the building, is don't be afraid to hold back a portion of the payment subject to the sign-off being met on the documents that you've established at the beginning of the project. So vendors understand that, manufacturers expect that. They're going to put the pressure on the accounts payable, accounts receivable departments, put the pressure on you to make sure that you're paying as fast as possible. But you have every right to ask them to demonstrate that they've met the sign-off criteria before you give them that final payment. And that'll keep them on your project to make sure that it's done correctly. Okay, so getting into the reliability aspect, that's enough for the controls. With respect to reliability, people believe that it's impossible to make systems reliable, but if we look at cars and airplanes and fire detection alarm systems like safety systems, we know that yes, it may be impossible, but you can get a very close approximation. And how does that approximation happen? It's the right mix of people, process, and technology. So in the fire alarm space, we have a number of standards. The standards start at the installation time for fire alarm. So there are two legally binding documents, the building code and the fire code, which dictate the who, what, where, when, and why of how a fire alarm system makes its way into a building. All of us sitting here today would not be possible unless the fire alarm system was installed according to the UL S524 installation standard, and if it was not verified to the 537 standard that says every single manual station or smoke detector or heat detector or sounder in this building will operate when an emergency event happens. This framework ensures that when the system goes in, it's not a negotiation between the owner and the vendor, the integrator, and the technologist. It's a standard developed by the government for the proper performance and operation and life safety within that facility. Beyond the actual installation, which, even when we're talking about the new connected systems, intelligent building solutions, sometimes they'll go in well day one. The second part of that is your maintenance requirements. So on the maintenance side, with respect to life safety, there are requirements to go back and retest these systems at least on an annual basis. And the owner himself has responsibility to test it on a daily basis. So if there's a problem with that building and you have a trouble on your panel and there's a buzzer going off, it is your legal responsibility to make sure that it is addressed. You cannot keep people inside of your building if the life safety system is impaired. The other flip side of this is that who is actually validating that the system is performing? So regulated through associations like the Canadian Fire Alarm Association, we have programs that are delivered through the approved colleges, such as Seneca College in Toronto, which offers a CFA technician course, or associations such as the Electrical Contractor Association of Toronto. They are certified and training technicians so that they can operate on the equipment. Beyond the general knowledge of life safety systems and the importance they have to the physical environment, these technicians must also be trained and certified on the equipment that they are actually installing. So leveraging this installation process and the maintenance process, we are able to guarantee with a reasonable probability that the systems are fully functional and operational all the time. And you know what? What's the fallback plan? Because there's always going to be an emergency, there's always going to be a disaster. It falls back down to if the system cannot be restored within minutes, within minutes, we're going to have to do a fire watch, which is expensive for the owner. Because who's paying for that fire watch? The owner is now responsible to have manned guards at all the different areas of the building to immediately notify people if there's an emergency in that building. So, talking about the enforcement now. Then we'll jump back to the documentation. With respect to enforcement, if we go through the process, the new buildings are always designed to the building code and the fire code. After you have claimed that you can comply with these codes and standards, a governmental authority having jurisdiction such as the fire marshal or someone from their office, will be designated to go and prove that this installation and maintenance has happened according to the book of the law. Occupancy permits are only granted after you can demonstrate that your life safety system is online. And the fire code has a number of penalties, which can range from basic fines to shutting down the building. And if you have a leased tenant space, it's going to be a lawsuit on your hands because these people are not able to operate or work in that environment, right up to penalties of actually going to jail if you've caused people to die through your negligence or gross misconduct in managing and maintaining that building. So going back to how we actually check the enforcement, flipping back one slide, enforcement is tied together with the documentation. So we see that there are product documents which specify, in this case, alarm signals, how they should propagate throughout a building. We also have requirements with respect to radio frequency interference. So one of the big problems of today with all the different wireless technologies is, will they cooperate? Well, why do we need to guess about that? Within a writer's laboratories, you must prove that your system will continue to operate upfront before it ever makes it to site, even with these other frequencies or technologies present, which we know could cause potentially a conflict. You need to demonstrate that you can do that before you're ever allowed to put the label and sell the equipment in the market. Same thing on the technician side. Technicians, they can't go and verbally issue a ticket that says, yes, this building is safe or it's not safe. They have established forms and standards that say every smoke detector was checked, every manual station was checked, and I went into every single room and heard the bell ringing or heard the sounder going off or saw the strobe visually activating when there was a fire inside of that building. So why, if we can do it in the life safety world, can we not do it for connected building, intelligent building systems? If we do follow these processes of people, process, and technology, applying the life safety framework into the intelligent building space and connected buildings, you can be guaranteed a better return on your investment. I can be guaranteed repeat business. And the owners, tenants, occupants, and people using these facilities can be guaranteed that they enjoy their environments that much more. So the key takeaways from my presentation, we talked a lot about the pressures in the marketplace, the supply and demand of the condos. Condos are coming online. People are expecting that they're differentiated with new technology, and we have to be able to understand which technological solutions are ready to go into the building today, and which ones will be coming down the road. IP backbones, a huge investment opportunity for people building projects today. Of course it's expensive, and sometimes you're building a building 5 or 10 years after a budget has been established. The most important investment you can make for your properties today is make sure that you have a communication pathway back from every single floor, every single zone or unit within your building, back through to the main lobby or the basement or wherever you put that data center or server inside of that building. I feel regulation is very important. If we don't regulate, we're going to continue to come back to this conference year after year and talk about what's going to happen 5 and 10 and 15 years from now. Because without regulation, there's no trust. We need to be able to negotiate up front, establish the documentation, get those contracts in place, and remove the fear from introducing these systems into our building. Let's leverage the experts. There's a lot of people who do a lot of work to make sure that these systems perform and integrate well into your facilities. Don't be shy to get more than one quote on your projects. Have 2 or 3 different people come in. Have them give you detailed proposals with options at different budget points to make sure that they're meeting all of your requirements. And finally, let's learn from what we're already doing in the life safety space. Life safety systems have been regulated. We're all safe. There is occasionally an emergency that does cause a loss of life, but those have been greatly minimized by the fact that we have people, process, and technology in place to make sure that these systems are working 100% of the time. So I'm done and ready for a little bit of Q&A if there are any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Jason from the audience? Frank.
You started off. Jason, good to see you again, and there's
Thank you.
something always comes up in the presentations, which is amazing.
Check. Yeah, good to see you. As you know, a lot of times companies are dealing with developers. Developers are dealing with tight budgets. What do you suggest that these companies do in order to get more traction along the X and Y type of systems that are not Z systems, which you absolutely need? And I do agree with you, regulation is everything. And if you can regulate the X's and Y's, it would be a lot easier to implement them. So I'll leave that with you.
It is a great question, and I think it echoes a lot of the sentiments of people in the room. We all want this technology, but the question is, how do we make it affordable? And we really need to borrow from other economies going around the world. The subscription economy, software as a service, is something that's changed the way we buy technology and equipment. And I think the development community needs to understand that some of the things that used to be capital cost allocation at the beginning of the project have to be investments that they're making that are shared by the property management and the tenants at future phases of that development. And in a lot of ways, there's cost savings. If you implement a more efficient furnace at the beginning of the project, which is going to cost you a little bit more, you're going to be paying less down the line on your monthly bills. So really the question is, let's understand with the focus groups of our tenants and our consumers, what people are really interested in using inside of that building, and then let's shift the money around or use the leasing models or subscription models to make it affordable, because affordability should not be something that holds us back from achieving the promise of these technologies inside of buildings.
Any other questions?
Jason? Hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. So, I'm a developer, so to answer your question also to make a comment. Basically, when it comes to incorporating new technology into your development, it's not the cost savings or budget most. For example, we are now doing an ADS 2 billion one-row risk industrial development. We are not really looking at cost savings. The challenge for us is to make sure that our clients understand what the new technology means. For example, if I'm selling a condo, a luxury condo at $1 or $2 million, my client has to understand what they're getting. And quite frankly, I'm speaking for myself or for Israeli developments, but we are not looking at the new technology as part of our construction costs. We put that mostly in terms of the marketing, because that's perceived value. If I can provide a technology or an automation system that's far more superior than other developers, then I know that I get a lot in my sales. So I think the challenge for us, or for the development companies, to understand, first of all, what the new technology is, and second of all, to make it more transparent, to make sure that your clients, the typical condo buyers, the typical tenants, understand what that is. It's good to have these fancy panels, fancy interaction panels, to have these new technologies, but how can I use that? I'll give you one example at one of our mid-rise condos that we recently finished. We have all these new sort of technology, but our clients are on average 55 years old. These are $2-3 million condos. They're not necessarily as technology savvy as a 25-year-old, right? So they have to understand what they're getting. So that was the challenge to make sure that they understand the technology that we put in their homes and they can use.
I know there's a few other developers in the room. I don't want to pick on them, but does anybody else want to have weigh in on this discussion about if the technology is becoming a factor in selling your properties? I see some people laughing at the back. Subi, come on up, come on. We got to hear from you.
There are many factors that play into it. Cost is one of them, but also it's a good point that you brought up about the technology and the technology being user friendly. But I think that's also part of the design process, how you design the system. Because it's not necessarily plug and play. You can create a backbone adapt different kind of technologies. So it's a combination of things. There's really no one right.
Thank you. We have a
I think we
comment
have
just
time
behind
for
you.
one more back there.
Hi there. I'm Mal from Erickson, and I tend to work in very large markets and then on a global basis. So one of the huge stumbling blocks I see to many vertical market solutions in the R&D market is where the rubber meets the road. It's not the actual development of the solution, it's the implementation of the solution. So I'm curious how you are distributing and installing and validating and verifying the operations of the system on a large scale basis. Because, you know, like if you're in Canada and you're selling in Canada, it's relatively easy, you get a sheer number. But as you start to scale on a national basis or a global basis, I'm curious how you're going to market with regards to, because these are all critical systems, ensuring that they are installed and operating as you expect from a technology.
Sure, and I'll use an analogy which is maybe a little bit easier to understand. If you look at commercial aircraft, there are certifications for pilots independent of where they're born or where they're trained that teach them how to fly these commercial aircraft. And we use a similar model with our distribution network. We actually sell into 97 countries around the world. Our distributors are required to come either to our factory or to one of our training centers worldwide to train on this equipment. We certify them, we give them a certificate of training that actually expires after 2 years. They need to retrain after that 2-year period of time. And that keeps them going with new changes in the technology and any changes that we've made to the operating model of that equipment as well. So it really comes back to the regulation. You got to have the right standards in place. You got to be certifying the people that are installing this equipment. And there should be some enforcement aspect of that as well for the checks and balances to make sure that the manufacturers are operating correctly within the ecosystem and the installers and tradespeople are doing the same.
Great. Thank you, Jason. On behalf of Connected Plus, Jason, I'd like to thank you for your insight and appreciate everything you did today.
Thank you very much.